Hey everyone, Greg Meskel here. Thanks for joining us. USA Water Polo at Home, our advanced series, week one coming to a close, and we have a great guest with us, but aren't they all? But a pleasure to be joined by Adam Krikorian, head coach of the women's national team. If you were just watching, this is a little pickup from where Coach was talking about the last two quadrennials, the last two Olympic teams. It was kind of a look back at kind of the way you built those two teams, and so I thought it'd be fun to kind of jump in after people had watched those and now revisit a couple of years later as you're on the brink of now going to a third Olympic Games. I think the first thing I want to start with you, Adam, was as you've gone through this twice and now are on the brink of a third, what have you learned about yourself as a coach? How have you kind of, I know it's a pretty broad topic, but how do you feel like you've grown as a coach from going through that first time around to now working on the third?
Um, yeah, I mean, it definitely a broad question, but at the same time, I think I would hope that I've grown quite a bit as a coach. I mean, it's crazy to think back in 2009, how just young and naive I was coming into that situation with that team off of the 2008 Olympic Games, and really just learning about the international game. I mean, I've had so many experiences over the last 11 years, right, that have added to this, what I would hope is more depth into just my knowledge of tactics, techniques, opposition. But I think ultimately, I think probably the biggest area of growth really has nothing to do with water polo. It has more to do with me as a person. It's has more to do with me just having a better understanding of kind of who I am, um, what I stand for, what I believe in, and being just more confident in those things. And that's not to say that I know everything about the game, because there's certainly stuff that I'm still learning, and I still want to get better. But there's almost this confidence of knowing who I am and what I'm good at, but also being confident in what I'm weak at and the challenges I have, and not being afraid to even say that those are some of the challenges I have. And it's amazing what your growth as a human being, and you could take this outside of coaching in general, but just your personal growth as a human being, how that impacts you and how much more successful you can be in whatever you do, because it allows you to be more confident, a little bit more resilient. It allows you to be more consistent, which isn't a very sexy word, but it's so important, to have if you want to have sustained success, is just being consistent. And that, again, that knowledge of kind of who I am is probably the biggest growth.
Because it's interesting. I think fans would look at your career, and if you're watching live on Facebook, you have a question for Coach K, feel free to drop it in the comments. But the team continues to perform well, and so an outsider might say, "Well, what do you have to adapt to? How do you have to change if the results continue to be the same in a positive fashion?" But I'm sure you can look back to say the 2015 World Championship and the most recent one in 2019, and even there's been growth despite the outcome being the same.
Yeah, when you start speaking like that, Greg, I get a little nervous, because that's if we just judge ourselves based on the outcome,
Sure.
I mean, at least for us, we won 69 games in a row, and we're going to have a hard time really feeling the need to grow and improve and be motivated to try to get better. So I know it's a saying and cliche and everyone says it, but like we really try not to judge ourselves based on kind of our results. And quite honestly, um, that's not easy. And I think we've gotten caught judging ourselves based on, our results. It's been really easy for us at times to be like, I don't need to be that good, because the person next to me is going to be good, or the person next to me here, or we're just going to find a way to win and have success. And I think we were kind of heading in that direction, to be completely frank. And it's a dangerous road to go, because I think it can catch up to you without you even knowing sometimes. So it's something that we're certainly very wary of moving forward.
Well, you hit on it right, because there are, I guess, external measures of how the team is doing, and the average fan, the person who just cheers for the team, really all they can go off of, right, are your results. So they look at that and they say, okay, everything's great. It must be working well. They're winning a bunch of games. To your point, you have to have these internal measures. So if you're not judging off the wins and losses, and frankly, you don't want to be in some respects, it sounds like, right? You don't want to be hanging your hat on just how you do. Not that you don't want to win. What else are you looking for? Is it an attitude? Is it a frame of mind? How do you judge? Okay, this is the right direction, even if the results are somewhere over here.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a certain attitude and hunger and fire and competitiveness that we always want to play with, and that is something that's really, you can't look at a box score and be able to read that. I mean, there's certain things that you might be able to, I could possibly look at, our shot blocks, or how we're doing defensively, all the things that kind of require effort that aren't necessarily going to show up on the box score that people recognize. But it's also just the way in which we play the game, the speed in which we play it, the energy. I mean, that's why at times, gotta shut this thing. That's why at times it's great to go back and watch video. And to be quite honest, like this has been a challenge for me, because even for me, I get the sense even from the team at times, it's like they can hear my spiel. Hey, we're not up to par, but it's really easy for them to, coach is just being, tough coach again. We're fine. We got the W. We won by 4 goals or 5 goals. What's there to worry about? So it's been a challenge. And that's why watching video is super helpful. But then just having some people within the team, outside of myself, that can hold other people accountable, and having the athletes kind of take some ownership of this process. And when they hear from each other a little bit, or that when they see it in video and they see their hustle isn't up to our standard, then it kind of rings a bell, as opposed to looking at the results or just listening to me all the time.
In the video that we just showed on the Facebook page about you looking back at the Rio games, you also touched on the London quadrennial, and you've described this before, but you kind of said, well, for London it was an older team and I had to be kind of more the levity, and then for the Rio team it was a younger team and I had to kind of be the hammer. So what is this third group? Where do they fall in?
That's a great question. I think I think I've been lost a little bit in between. I think it's just a little bit of combo of both, and to be honest, we're still trying to figure it out. I mean, we certainly aren't an old, super experienced group, but this group has been through a lot and they've had a lot of success. But we're also not young and naive. We have people who, again, have had some experience, and I think it's this combination. I think that the tough thing now, as I've kind of alluded to just already in my previous comments, is just we have quite a bit of continuity, right? And it's trying to do our best to not let that continuity decrease competition or consistency, and trying not to let that continuity increase complacency at the same time, right? And just being aware of that as much as possible. You want to give them confidence. This is a confident group. They have a lot of confidence in their ability, but yet there's this line, right, where if they start being a little bit too overconfident, that's when we can get taken. And so it's more of a balancing act this time around than it was the first two. The first one, like you said, it was bring some levity, let's do this kumbaya, more of a Ted Lasso type, if anyone watched the Apple TV
I just started that yesterday.
Series. Oh, it's so good. And then, the last quad was more, they just needed to be, I think the rules, the discipline and the consistency needed to be there, and I was much tougher. So this time it's certainly a balance.
That's an interesting point you bring up, and it's one that's born out, I guess, out of success. It's born out of things that teams want to accomplish. You want a group that enjoys being together, that likes to work together, that is successful, and so you get all those things that most coaches are striving for, and a lot of programs don't get. And now you find a new problem on your hands to try and make sure that they still, I guess, are motivated enough or face enough adversity in a way to kind of keep growing and staying competitive. And you're still picking a team for every event, so you have to kind of keep that competitive nature going. But it's challenging. You have to almost invent some moments to uh, figure out ways to motivate, because when a team wins 70 games in a row, I mean, what are you supposed to say?
Yeah, I joke about that all the time because it's like, and I even joke honestly with the team. It's like last quad, I threw the whole kitchen sink at them. I mean, I felt like I challenged them in every possible way, um, and they always answered the call. And I think I've kind of run out of ways in which I can challenge them. So, you know, it's tough. It's really difficult, and you know, you have. I think anyone who's been doing something for a long time and has had success, they'll tell you that the first time that they had success, there was this great joy and energy and enthusiasm, and also maybe this fear of the unknown, and it's just such an emotional roller coaster ride. And then as you've had success, like for us this time, it's been a little bit more difficult. And I'm speaking even candidly about myself. It's been a little bit more difficult to kind of find that joy and that energy and that enthusiasm, comparatively to that first time you kind of go through it. So that's why it's great to have new people and new blood, and welcome them to the group, and new players, whether it's athletes or even staff, to bring a little bit of energy, and that uniqueness, and even that fear a little bit to this process to kind of keep us on edge.
You, like every team, has been dealing with the pandemic, and your team was out of the water, I'm sure. And I know from talking to some of them, they had never spent this much time away from playing water polo. It's one of the few times, right, where I think an Olympic team can relate to all the teams at any level around the country. How have you, now that you've gotten some semblance of normalcy back, at least getting back in the water, how have you kind of navigated this return to play for your team?
I'd probably horribly. It's been hard. It's been hard. I can't. I'm not going to sit here on this Facebook thing and say it's been easy and we've done this and this and this works and this works. It's been a challenge, man. I mean, you're sitting on Zoom. I think when this all happened at first, you know, there was some hope that the Olympics were still gonna happen, and so you wanted to stay fresh from a water polo standpoint, but there's this fear and anxiousness, and people are scared about the pandemic. And at first, I was kind of thinking we're going to do a lot of water polo, but that very quickly kind of went out the window. I got the sense from the team, and I got the sense even from just listening to myself, is that no one wanted to talk about water polo. So we didn't, you know, we spent some time just kind of doing some mindfulness and working with our sports psych, which I'm a big believer in. Maybe not all the athletes are on board with it, but I certainly am a big believer in it. And then, but it's been challenging to have even conversations with them. We're so used to being together and smiling and laughing and being angry even, and being able to have conversations. As a coach, it's been a challenge just communicating to them and not being able to see responses. And no one feels that comfortable communicating in this way. It's amazing how quickly they want to respond, like via the message, but not necessarily vocally in a group setting over Zoom. So it's been a challenge, and we've tried to have some really tough conversations as well, with everything going on in the world right now, and along the issues of racial equality, and that's been challenging as well. And I think every time we start off a conversation, it's like, I know this is hard, but let's try to make it the best that we can. And we've had some good moments, but we've had a lot of bad moments, to be quite frank. And I think that if you're struggling too as a coach or as an athlete, that's totally normal. And we hope to just get better at it and get back to some type of normalcy moving forward.
One of the things we've talked about throughout this pandemic time, and it's across the board on every athlete, because they've been out of the pool, they haven't trained, they are concerned about getting back to where they were. And for example, your team, right, was in the midst of extensive training. There's just bound to be a drop off of conditioning and of the way that they work together. How do you, coaching the most elite team in the world, properly gauge their return? You want them to get back to where they were, but there has to be some sort of grace period here, right, to kind of ramp back up to where they were at.
Yeah, there is. We got to be careful. I think the first thing we trained, we took some time off. We trained for 10 weeks. We took another 4 weeks off, and we just started this Monday. And you can't go from 4 weeks off, even from 4 weeks off of not that high intensity training, to just kind of getting right back into it. So we're really using these first 3 weeks to try to get us to a level to where we can kind of start pushing them a little bit. So we're practicing, we're an hour and a half in the water most days. A couple days a week, we're 2.5 hours in the water, and the intensity is not very high. We're slowly building into it. I mean, it's important for us to kind of look and see where we want to go. We don't have anything, and we're not preparing for anything in October or November. The next biggest thing is the Olympic Games, and that's when we want to be our best. So knowing that we have a little bit of a long runway here, it gives us a little bit of a liberty to kind of ease back into it. We don't want anyone to get hurt, and that's super important too, as we kind of come back to things as well.
On kind of a silver lining sort of thing, in addition to the water polo and the other tough conversations you've talked about the group having, whether it's talking about dealing with a pandemic, right, social responsibility as far as health and all of that's concerned, or some of the social justice issues that have gone on for the last several months, is that in a weird way, and it's maybe not water polo related, but a chance for this team to grow in an area that you really couldn't have predicted or pushed them in previously? Kind of world circumstances stepped in to allow that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, you're always looking for your team to be able to connect on a larger level, outside of the game. And I think when you're able to connect and be vulnerable at times, and really just kind of get to know each other a little bit on a deeper level, other than X's and O's and technique and so on and so forth, with regard to water polo, it allows you to understand each other a little bit better. And this has been a great opportunity for us. And I think we have grown through this process as a team, but I think we have a long way still to grow. And it's kind of just opened up the door. I wouldn't say we've charged right through it, but we've put, maybe tiptoe, maybe a couple toes, or maybe a foot inside that door, or past that door. And but there's so much more. I think for us, it's been more about just education and educating ourselves, even myself included. It's been an eye-opening process, and we're not going to get it all kind of in one big swoop. It's going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of conversations to have a better understanding of kind of where we are as a country, and where we are individually, and hopefully ultimately kind of bring us to a better place as a group.
The idea of being vulnerable, since you hit on that, I wanted to bring up the story that you and the team took part in. I guess it was a couple of weeks ago now in the LA Times. And your team for a long time had adversity, but it was limited largely to the pool. When you would say, well, what has this team faced? It's been, you could look back at the 2011 World Championships, 2013 Worlds, or going back before you, the 2008 Olympics, that sort of thing. And then in the last couple of years, as the team has gone this way, you have faced other things out of the pool. It was a different moment for not just you, but for everyone to kind of be very open and vulnerable and tell their stories and kind of really open it up to kind of public consumption. How did the team kind of work through that, and what's been kind of the response you've heard from you and some of the women on the team, just really kind of opening up and telling some of their more difficult challenges?
Well, I think anytime you kind of open up like that, it gives you a better chance to move. I shouldn't even use the words move past, because on some level you're never going to be able to move past some things, but it's going to give you um, some better tools to be able to handle those emotions moving forward. So that's been helpful, I think, for those four athletes. But I think it's really important for me to say that I thought it was a beautifully done article, and I appreciate Kevin from LA Times to shining a light on those stories. However, to there's four of us that were kind of highlighted as with going through some adversity, right? To say that we're the only four out of this entire team that has gone through things that have been difficult wouldn't be true. So the only thing I didn't like about it, and this is by no means is it am I trying to be harsh on Kevin Baxter, who wrote the article. Teams everywhere and organizations everywhere and families everywhere are going through a lot, especially during these times. So in some ways, as difficult as personally my situation was, it feels selfish to even talk about it, because there's other people on the team that weren't mentioned that are going through really tough times. And again, I think if anything, that article hopefully allows the rest of us, and maybe even other people outside of our team, allows people to understand that it's okay, everyone's going through something and it's a challenge, and it's okay to be open about it and talk about it, and it allows us to be able to grieve a little bit and deal with it and help one another. And that's what being a team is all about. And if we're not doing that, we're not taking advantage of what being a team is all about. That's the coolest thing about being part of a group, is like relying on the people next to you to help you make your experience better. And if you're not doing that, you might as well be playing an individual sport. And that's not what water polo is.
It may sound cliche, but I think you've lived the experience. A team can really help lift others up when you're in these tough moments.
Yeah, there's no doubt. They can, if you who are going through tough things, if you are willing to be open, and the others around you have empathy for and compassion for one another. Of course, sometimes you're going to get in situations in which others don't necessarily have the compassion or even the awareness or the empathy for the people going through difficult things. And but it certainly can. It certainly doesn't make it easy, but it helps you, and it's always great to feel like you're supported and loved, no matter who you are on the team.
Yeah, I just thought that was kind of a useful lesson that you and some of the team talked about for all the teams now that are working their way back through, that have had their seasons canceled or they can't get back in their pool, whatever it might be. We were talking a bit about kind of your building off of your previous year's coaching and looking back at your review of the last couple of quadrennials. And you've talked about the growth you're still going through. What's something as a coach that you want to get better at? I think it's good for for other coaches to hear that even someone who they maybe look up to is still working on things. What else do you want to get better at?
Yeah, well, I would say communication is always something that I can do a better job of. I think at times I can be a very good communicator, and I can do a good job on an individual level, but I don't think I communicate enough, and it just on so many different levels, right? It's like those individual check-ins I think can be so effective and so important for our athletes, being able to check in with them to see how they're doing, but also just that individual meeting to let them know what your vision is for them, and them being able to hear, or for them to be able to give us their version of their vision and kind of what they see. But then also just during the practice, I mean, I constantly have to remind myself that sometimes I give them a little bit too much credit, and I just think that they know what I know, and I have this vision, and oh yeah, they have this vision as well. But no, it's my job to continue to instill that vision and communicate that vision. I remember back when I was, 18 to whatever, 25 years old. I was an athlete. I mean, I just thought about when I was at practice, I was thinking about that practice. And then after that, I didn't really think about it very much. So just communication is probably the biggest thing. But I'm learning a lot about still about the game and just different drills and the creativity that can be involved in practice planning. I think that's something, when you've been doing something for such a long time, it's easy to kind of get into a rut and like, hey, this is what I do on Monday, this is what I do on Tuesday, this is what I do on Wednesday. So really trying to challenge myself to kind of get out of that norm. And I'm going to do that by kind of watching other people, by talking to other people, and watching even other sports, and trying to incorporate some other things outside of what I know in my mind into what we do.
Really good stuff here, as always, Coach. Get a couple of comments, questions coming in from the Facebook page. One, we had a conversation earlier this week with three ODP coaches that work at various levels in the women's pipeline, and the topic of coachability came up, and it was something they all kind of talked about. When you think about an athlete that is coachable, that wants to get better, what does that look like to you?
I mean, the first thing I think about is just, and this isn't always the case, the first thing I think about is just their eye contact. When you're coaching someone and you get eye contact, that typically means that they're listening to you. Now, that's not always the case. I've had athletes, and we have a couple athletes on our team now who I thought initially when I was coaching them, they would have never looked at me in the eye. And I would be like, what is their deal, right? They're not very coachable. I mean, I made this early judgment, but then you would say some things and then they would actually execute it in the water. And so it would tell me, oh no, they're listening to me. They're just struggling. They just don't necessarily want that eye contact. And I think that's what we're looking for as a coach. You're looking for people who, when you say something, be able to implement it right then and there, or the very next time you get that opportunity. And everyone in the world can shake their head yes, and could even look you in the eye and shake their head yes, but not everyone will actually hear that information and then incorporate it into the next drill or into the next play. And ultimately, we're defined, our coachability is probably defined by our actions. And, what if we're taking the necessary steps to get better and to use the wisdom around us, not just only from the coaches, but also from the athletes.
And then a question here from Chris B about assembling a team. When you're evaluating athletes, is it purely talent and skill based, or does personality play a role? How do those work together?
Yeah, I think personality plays a role. I mean, position and skill base clearly plays an enormous role in it, but I wouldn't say so much personality, because ultimately we want everyone to kind of bring their own personality, right? And no one is gonna, people aren't gonna make this team or not make this team just solely based on their personality. I think a better word is them living up to kind of the standards that we have for the team, and that's the selflessness, that's hard work, that's resilience. Those things are the things that we're really paying attention to. And quite honestly, I would say that sometimes the best, I've said this before, sometimes the best athletes end up not being Olympians, because this is not an easy road. Many times it's those that kind of have that toughness and that resilience and that work ethic that are able to kind of last through it all, that are the ones that come out on the other side. But it's a combination of all those things. And it's not an easy question, and certainly not always the same answer, kind of depending on the team and the collection of athletes that you have.
But there is something to be said for, like you said, personality won't make you earn, win the spot, but it could lose the spot for you if all things are equal between a couple of people, and someone's personality meshes well with everyone. That's going to give them a little leg up.
Yeah, I guess and we're maybe getting into semantics a little bit. I guess I struggle with the word personality, because I don't know. When I think of personality, I think of I don't think of necessarily the values or standards in which they live by, right? I'm just thinking about, are they quiet? Are they talkative? Are they, we're going to judge you more on what's inside of you, right? More than kind of what is on the exterior.
And last thing, how far can the Denver Nuggets go?
Ooh. God, I hope they go all the way. I mean, the Joker is just unbelievable. I mean, the combination of Murray and the Joker and the pick and roll, the pick and pop, God, man, they're fun to watch. And I'll tell you, again, you can learn so much by just watching NBA or watching other sports, or you can watch these sports and it just reaffirms certain things. Like, you look at the teams that are playing now, Boston and Miami. Sorry, I'm getting to basketball now, and Denver, and even the Lakers. I know AD and LeBron are absolutely amazing, but their ability to play as a team, their toughness, the ball movement, the ability to share the ball. I mean, it's a recipe for success. I saw the Clippers, and they have certainly a ton of talent, but just, they certainly didn't hit some shots, but a lot of one-on-one stuff. And you could tell there wasn't a connection there. I'm not saying their chemistry is bad, but you could feel the energy and the joy in which Denver was playing with, and how much love and respect that they have one another. And that translates into their ability to execute, and their ability to be resilient, and their ability to be adaptable. And so to answer your question, I think they're gonna have a hard time beating LeBron and AD, but I've certainly become a big fan of the Nugs.
Well, I was just curious about that team. They come back, not to veer totally into NBA talk, but we both love it very much. They come back twice from down 3-1. You've been on and around successful teams. What is it about a group that allows them to do that sort of thing? Is that kind of, they just catch fire? Were they always really close and they kind of just figured it out? Are there parallels water polo teams can draw from watching that?
Well, I think they did a great job, but I think it's a combination of them doing a great job and also the opposing team. At least I didn't watch the Utah series as much as I did the Clipper series, and I think the moment got to them, right? It kind of gets in your head, and the lesson to be learned is just continue to be consistent and give yourself a chance. And you get in those situations, you're down 3-1. I'll take the Houston Rockets, for example. You're down 3-1, or you're down by 16 in the third. It's easy just to cash it in and be like, it's easy to come up with all these excuses in your mind as to this isn't our year. Like, let's just catch it. I've been in the bubble for 70 days. I want out of this thing. But if you really love each other and trust each other and enjoying each other's play, you're going to be a heck of a lot more consistent, and that's going to give you a chance. That doesn't necessarily guarantee you any success, but if a team like the Clippers struggle or Utah struggles, it's going to always give you a chance to kind of stay in the game, and that's what they did. So I would be shocked if the Lakers just kind of walk through this thing easy. I mean, they could still win in 5, but I'd be shocked if every game wasn't super competitive.
Excellent. Well, Coach, thanks for a little NBA talk, but also kind of looking back on your kind of progression here. I think it's useful to kind of hear a bit how even the team that everyone thinks is the best in the world and has proven it still has to kind of work through and improve and grow and learn. So appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure, Greg. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Same here. All right, we'll talk to everyone again next week. Here we have more At Home with USA Water Polo coming up next week. So make sure you check your email coming this Monday.